Good morning, everybody. For those of you whom I have not had the chance to meet yet, my name is Shohre Parham. I'm an assistant professor at AMSIP. I would also like to take a moment to welcome each and every one of you. Your presence here today is greatly appreciated. I would also like to thank our keynote speakers, Daniël and Hafid, for their inspiring presentation. Now we are excited to continue the discussion with our esteemed panelists. So to build upon the keynote speech, we are living in an era where the future of work is rapidly changing. We are all facing new challenges and opportunities at the same time. From the rise of remote working and automation to the evolving expectations surrounding good work and career development, there is much to consider when exploring this question. How does our future workplace look like? That is precisely why we have brought together a group of experts from diverse sectors to help us navigate this complex yet intriguing topic. I am proud to introduce and welcome our esteemed panelists. Emily Lowe is the Director of Data at MoonPay since 2022. She holds a master's degree in cultural studies from University of Amsterdam. Prior to her role at MoonPay, Emily has served as a senior data scientist for several years in renowned companies like Uber and Coinbase. Our next distinguished panelist is Stan Kaatee. He currently holds the position of Director General of Work and Pensions at the Ministry for Social Affairs and Employment. From 2017 to 2021, Stan served as the Director of Economic Affairs for Amsterdam City Hall, where he played a crucial role in shaping the economic landscape of the city. Prior to that, he held the position of Senior Advisor to the Dutch Prime Minister. Stan's academic journey includes the pursuit of a degree in public administration at Leiden University. It is with my great pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelist, Dr. Cara Antoine. She brings a wealth of experience and expertise in the fields of technology, digital health, and transformation. Currently serving as the Executive Vice President at Capgemini, a renowned multinational consulting and technology services company, Dr. Antoine holds a prominent leadership. In addition to her position at Capgemini, Dr. Antoine serves as an advisory board member at EZ. She also holds the significant role of Digital Health Committee Transformation Leader at ESCRS. She has earned her DBA from University of Bradford in 2015. Last but not least, it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Jos Akkermans. Dr. Akkermans is an Associate Professor of Sustainable Careers and Organizational Behaviour at Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. With a strong focus on sustainable careers, career shocks, and employability, his research has made significant contributions to these important areas of study. Dr. Akkermans has an impressive publication record with numerous publications in esteemed journals within his field. We are truly proud to have them here today as our panelists. So before we dive into the discussion, I would also like to inform you about the structure we will be following. We have one round of questions with our panelists, and each one of our esteemed panelists will be given one question. Eva and myself will moderate this round of questions, and you will be able to see the questions on the screen. After that, there will be 15 to 20 minutes time set aside for you, our esteemed audience, to ask your questions. So our first question goes to Stan. What does the future of work look like in the Netherlands, Stan? And how has the government's vision of future of work changed after the pandemic?
Okay, let me try. Is this okay for you, the microphone, or do I need to take it to my mouth? No, it's okay? Good. No, it's not good. This is much better. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Stan. I represent the government of the Netherlands today here in your panelist. What is the future of work looking like? Well, we just learned in the excellent keynote speech by the former speaker that it's very difficult to predict. And of course, especially the government itself, we are always behind because the government cannot decide for you what kind of jobs you're going to do. That's going to depend on what is going to happen in the Netherlands. Many of you are the future labor force, and many of you will have jobs of which I don't even know what they are today. Because when I did the study 25 years ago, there was no web applications, didn't exist. There was no mobile telephone. All these things, they change a lot in the labor market. Especially, it's no doubt, you don't have to be a professor to predict that artificial intelligence will change a lot in our employment in the Netherlands. But also, I'm not afraid, like the predecessor, it will destroy jobs, but it will also create a lot of new ones. But it gives a lot of challenges to policymakers like myself at the ministry, because how do we have enough safeguards that that work is still interesting for you, that privacy issues which arise from artificial intelligence are duly met. And also important is, how do we get you, our labor force in the Netherlands, how do we give them the right skills to stay possible to have good jobs in the future, and also jobs which are sensible but also give you enough income to have an independent life and to be able to pay for your own life. That's very interesting for the government. Next to that, we need to make sure that you get in our educational system, you get the right skills. It's also necessary for us to increase the matching in our labor market, because we now, when you have finished your study, you get an exam or you get a diploma. But it's also people, we have a lot of students who are not very well in reading books or getting a diploma, but still have the necessary skills. So how do we match employers and employees if they don't have the right papers, if they don't have the right diplomas? I have a lot of trust in the adaptability of people working in the labor market, because you can see during the COVID pandemic, in 2-3 months, everyone was used to working at home. I remember myself, I was working at Amsterdam City Hall, and the government closed the country down, and then I learned there is an app, it's called Zoom, and then you have a camera, and then you can talk to the city mayor, and we're like, huh? But then in a week time it worked, and in 2 weeks time, we got the government functioning again. So adaptability is very, we are very adaptability. I believe that very much. The future of work, my last final conclusion. In the Netherlands, and that's different from other countries, we have a very strong social dialogue. What do I mean with that? The government is actually always discussing with employers and unions together in a functioning way, how should we make decisions for the future. That's different from other countries. We think it's better because if you talk together, you can also learn from each other and make better policies. I think that's different from other countries.
Thank you very much. Jos, our second question is for you. So how are higher education institutions affected by the transition that is taking place in the job market? And what are your observations?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very broad but also very important question. I think it actually, maybe it's not even the future of work, it's already the present state of work, and definitely also the future of work. I think it has a fundamental impact on the type of students, the kind of graduates we train in higher education. And this applies to a University of Applied Sciences, but also to the university without the applied sciences, so where I'm from. So looking at, if I depart from my research on what we call school-to-work transitions, right? So this is the classic word for students transitioning into their initial employment situation. And the classic perspective, and I think many people still view it that way, is universities or higher education trains young people to make that one big choice in life. That's when you choose your occupation. I'll be a doctor, I'll be a plumber, I'll be whatever. That's the big choice. I think what we're seeing is that this is changing rapidly. So the school-to-work transition is no longer this one big decision moment, but it's a series of decisions and transitions, basically. Many young people switch jobs quite regularly in the first 5 to 10 years of their careers, and even afterwards. On the one hand, that's a pretty nice outlook for all of you here, all the students, because it means that this first decision is not as crucial as it was before. Of course, at the same time, we're seeing careers are also becoming more complex, right? So higher education is used to training for a first job, is training to become an economist, a doctor, a plumber, whatever. If there's suddenly a large diversity of career paths, we're seeing more and more entrepreneurs after education, people going into the gig economy. And the gig economy is not just the food riders and the Uber drivers we tend to think about. More and more we're seeing all these highly skilled gig platforms where very smart, highly trained professionals offer their services on the basis of a gig. And so that means for higher education, to answer your question, I think we need to change our perspective that we don't just, quote unquote, deliver people with diplomas, because over 50% of our labor market will have either University of Applied Sciences or university degree. That's not your added value anymore. We need to deliver work-ready, employable graduates, and that's fundamentally different than just teaching some theory or teaching some courses and saying, here's your diploma, go ahead. The connections need to be strengthened, which is what we are doing now. And I guess what the dean said in his opening this morning.
Thank you very much.
Cara, I have also a question for you. Based on your experience, your extensive experience in the high-tech industry, also service industry, how do you see the main changes in your sector when it comes to technology?
Yeah, thanks very much, Eva, for your question and for the keynotes from this morning, and to these esteemed panelists. Thank you for this invitation. I think this is really important to shed some light on this very important topic, and I'll refer indeed more to the services sector and high tech in some of my comments. As you know, in recent years, we've really witnessed an acceleration in the technology that has disrupted these areas of business in particular, and also in my experiences, I would add, in the healthcare industry. The service sector, which encompasses the range of industries, so we think about hospitality, we think about retail and customer service, there's been a profound transformation happening in these areas. And thanks to automation, artificial intelligence, these are some powerful tools that are revolutionizing the customer interactions and making the interactions much more personal, but also streamlining processes. And we heard a little bit about productivity, production, and efficiencies earlier today. But with the rise of chatbots, so ChatGPT that we've seen today, virtual assistants, multimodality, automated self-service systems, companies can now handle customer inquiries and requests much more efficiently, and as again stress on that personalization attribute in a way that is much more relevant to the experience than ever before. I think that there's been a discussion recently of, do you fear the future or are you embracing the future due to these technological advancements, and is this going to lead to widespread job loss? But I think the reality is a lot more nuanced than that. Yes, certain routine jobs and low-skilled tasks may become automated, and this will create an opportunity for workers to upskill themselves and transition to much more fulfilling roles. It's been said that in the era of automation, that this has caused great disruption to blue-collar work. And in this current era of creativity, of creation, and generative AI, I believe this disruption is going to take place more in the space of white-collar roles. For example, the service sector is going to require a new breed of professionals. They can leverage technology to enhance customer experiences and provide much more personalized services. And by harnessing data analytics, companies can gain valuable insights into the customer's preferences, enabling them to tailor their offerings and deliver service which is superior to what we experience today. But moreover, I believe that the high-tech industry is really driven by constant innovation, and this stands at the forefront of technology revolutions. Breakthrough in the field of generative AI is a topic that I'm sure we're all talking about today. Robotics, augmented reality, these are transforming the way we live and work today. And the high-tech industry has become a driving force behind the economic growth, which offers great opportunities in the roles of the future when we are equipped with the right skills. And I think that's going to be very exciting. For instance, roles that I see already emerging rapidly around data analysts and prompt engineers. So just like in the good old days that as leaders we were taught to ask good questions to our workers and to people that were our colleagues, in a similar way, in prompt engineering, we need to learn to ask good questions and to apply good critical thinking to be able to really drill into the right type of information that we're seeking. It's essential, however, also to acknowledge the potential challenges that lie ahead. The rapid pace of change of technological advancements really demands a highly adaptive workforce. New technologies emerging at this pace, workers have to be prepared to learn and to adapt continuously. A phrase that I often like to say is, let's be learn-it-alls. I don't think it's possible to be know-it-alls. As these new technologies are emerging on the scene, it will create a necessity for us to shift in our education and in our training systems that will force on developing skills like critical thinking that we talked about earlier in the keynote, in creativity and adaptability. And I think lifelong learning is going to become a cornerstone of success in the future work. In the classroom of one of the mentees that I'm currently working with at Erasmus School of Business, her professors are encouraging students to leverage ChatGPT for their assignments so that students can learn to work with the tools and apply even deeper critical thinking and questioning skills. And I think when we saw the curve on the previous keynote, that showed first we will learn the complementary skills before tools like AI may start to take over parts of the work that we could do. Also, I think as technology is evolving, ethical considerations are becoming increasingly significant. When I had the chance to sit down with Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, when I was Chief Marketing and Chief Operation Officer there, I thought that our conversation would lead us in a direction of the latest technologies. We had just cut the ribbon at the Quantum Lab here in the Netherlands together, and I was asking him the question of, so what would you advise passionate individuals in the space of technology to study if they're going to continue their studies? And his answer was pretty simple and straightforward. He said, I wish that every student would study ethics. And this was a statement that he made in 2019. We need to ensure that the technological advancements are harnessed responsibly and ethically, with a focus on inclusivity, on transparency, which I think is really vital, understanding where the data is coming from, and of course also on fairness. And I think in the high-tech industry, including the roles of developers and creators, we all have a responsibility to address concerns around privacy, data security, and the potential for the bias of data in the data and in our algorithms. And so I think those collaborative efforts between industry leaders, the policymakers in government, and academia are crucial to strike the right balance between innovation and ethics. And I'll close my comments there due to time.
Thank you for an extensive and very clear answer, Cara. Emily, as a representative also, you have a history as a data scientist. You now are a director of data. How do you look at the changes in the job market and then specifically in your industry?
Yeah, wow. Oh, anyway, sorry. The reverb in this is intense. I have a question for people here, actually. Who here is a morning person? It's like a handful. I am admittedly not a morning person, and I am very glad to be living in this era. So one of the things about remote work that obviously escalated in the pandemic was that the tech industry has actually been at the forefront of that for a while now. The concept of work being tied to a space is very much decoupled, to say the absolute least. So to give an anecdotal example, when I first started my career, I was at an agency as a digital analyst, and one of my perf reviews said, yeah, you don't show up at 9, and that's a problem, but your work is good. I was like, what? Excuse me? I don't quite understand. The thing about remote work in the tech industry, and this is also where the tech industry is the forefront of, is that you start to realize your work is not tied to your space or where you show up. The fact that you're clicking a bunch of buttons behind a computer 9 hours a day actually means nothing. The kind of like flip side of this is like, you know, you hear your Googles and Uber, and to be in the heyday of Uber, like we had breakfast, lunch, dinner served at the office. And you start to realize, okay, your work bleeds into your life, to say the absolute least. But the reason why they do that is because they realize, okay, some people work well in the morning, some people work well in the afternoon, some people work well, like myself, late at night, like 10 p.m. and like on the ball. And that is something that has been really embraced, I think, throughout the pandemic for various reasons. And I think that is staying. One of the things that it really highlights, however, is poor management practices and very bad processes. In order to have a remotely distributed organization, you have to be very, very good about communicating with intent, having processes with intent, and being super aware that some people just aren't in the same building, aren't even in the same country, aren't in the same time zone. How do you accommodate for that? And so that is one thing that the tech industry is again, like kind of revolutionizing to some extent. It's a bit difficult because I think like, aside from certain types of work, but especially in tech, the fact that you have to think about the day as a 9 to 5 is a little ridiculous, right? Like, why does it matter if you code at 9 a.m. versus 5 p.m.? No. If you don't have a meeting with anybody, what is the point, right? And that, I think, is also something that we're starting to kind of get around towards. Somewhat coincidentally or ironically, we're moving more towards an academic/research mode of work, where you're very independent a lot of the time. But the only difference is, or a big difference rather, as opposed to research, is that you need to be aligned with everybody else on your projects or whatever you're trying to execute 100%. And that requires a lot of energy and a lot of work. And I think that is something that you don't really learn in school. You kind of like learn it in some way, but it's not a explicit part of what people consider to be part of work. But the technical skills actually, when I hire, I expect a certain level of technical skills, but I'm actually looking for how far can you think outside of the box? How much are you strategic? How can you critically think, et cetera? And so work is just changing in terms of, you know, I'm not going to work. I am, for better or for worse, I must admit this is not maybe the best sort of like promotion, you know, work-life balance, but I am my work in some sense. But in as much as you are that also allows you to create some kind of agency over yourselves, because we are all going to be at some point basically entrepreneurs and innovators on our own. And how you navigate that is what work is going to be, or work is already actually. And how you try and kind of choose and bring yourself to the table is going to be a lot more personal in some sense. It's not just about ticking off a bunch of boxes, checking in, checking out. It's about actually bringing sort of like your own ideas and what you have as a person to the table, and that's what work is going to be, or is.
Very clear, yeah.
Yes,
and
you.
also,
Shall we move to our audience?
yes,
Any questions?
we have lots of questions, but we think you might have questions as well. So if you raise your hand, I will come to you with the microphone. Sitting is the new smoking, I was told, so running around is healthier.
Then I will try to not be smoking anymore and stand up. Yeah. My question is direct to Cara. Thank you very much for your insights. I think if you worry about the transformation about AI, Capgemini, you don't have to worry about it. I assume you get more projects. But my question is that to confirm my assumption, do you see a transition because of the changes of the AI and future of work? Do you see there's a transition in the quantity and quality of your clients and the skills of your employees at Capgemini?
Thanks very much for the question, and indeed it's the thing that we're all talking about right now. And I think when we look at the acceleration, I would probably consider the month of April one of the most transformative months in history, literally. We've seen hundreds of developments being made on AI and technology in the month of April alone, and May is already looking to exceed that already. So yes, it's moving very fast. And we're all people also as well at Capgemini who are learning about this. But if you actually look back in time, AI has been around for at least 7 years. So we're learning to work with a child that's 7 years old that sometimes makes mistakes. And what we know is that the AI, of course, this is helping us to create new content, but that is based on its recognition of large data patterns that it sees in masses of data that it can retrieve. And so that is offering a lot of challenges to organizations, but also to us in terms of how we navigate that. What I would like to offer is and even a question perhaps to Stan, but when I look across to the geopolitical opportunities to the country of China, in China the government have made a decision that they will fully invest in the development of artificial intelligence, particularly looking at the generative side of AI. When we go across the pond to the United States of America, they've basically said, we're going to empower the entrepreneurs, and we're going to ensure that we have a system in place that helps startups and scale-ups to invest in finding all those niche solutions and helping us to develop the AI economy. Who gets it right? What's the right approach? And when we look now toward the Netherlands government in terms of what we're doing here, there's a challenge at the moment in terms of how do we get that funding to those that need it to help us do the development. And also not yet quite a position that says we, the government, will invest fully in AI and that we will make a stance in that. So I think there's still a lot of debate on what the right direction is going to go. When it comes to, you asked the question about quality and those cases that are coming in, I have, I would say it's an area you can come to at Capgemini called the Applied Innovation Exchange, the AIE. And I have several of these around the world where customers literally can come to us and experiment. And in the last week alone, I've had more than 50 requests here in the Netherlands alone of companies that said, we want to experiment, we want to learn what this is. But here's the catch. Just because we have the access to the data and the technology, should we use it? And I think this is the question that we're all asking ourselves right now from an ethical, legal perspective. Just because we can do it, should we do it? And that's actually the first question, because technologically, well, we can do pretty much everything. But the question is, should we? And that's where I feel that the power of ethics and those considerations are really going to come to the forefront in making sure there are decisions being made that are not going to have poor consequences for people and the planet. I'll just give one small example and then close my comment. Maybe Stan wants to comment as well on the views of the Dutch government. Yeah. So there was a project called White Flags. And the White Flags project was one where we were able to tag where active military were located in order to help get assistance to them when needed. So if they needed first aid, if they needed food, anywhere on the planet, we could allocate resources to get to them on time. However, a year ago, February, a war broke out that Russia caused with Ukraine. And what happened with programs like White Flags is that suddenly this became a very threatening capability that, if gotten into the wrong hands, could have put the lives of soldiers at risk, because suddenly their positions would have become known. So while an intended development was made initially with good intentions, doing good for people, you can see also that very quickly that can go in the wrong direction when it's used for poor purposes. So I'll leave it there, and maybe Stan, you want to follow up?
Very short. You're right that the Dutch government, we don't have a position yet, as you say, between the Chinese way or the American way. But it's true, especially on the ethical side. We are very active. I think the government is a little bit wary of artificial intelligence because of privacy issues and because of the same questions you said about should we do everything we can do. I mean, the biggest national company in the Netherlands is actually the government. We have data on 18 million people, and every person in the Netherlands is a customer of the Dutch government. So we have the amount of data at, for instance, the tax office is amazing, and it would be so easy to try to combine stuff. It would be very interesting commercially, but there are very strict privacy laws against it, and I think that's a good thing. And basically, the European Union, compared to the USA and China, is very tough on privacy issues, and I think the Dutch government is one of the leading governments within the European Union on this issue. So we're not trying to predict the future, but we're trying to work with artificial intelligence, but also at the same time, it's not just a hooray. We also try we also try to to guard against the evil issues, and that's a very difficult discussion.
Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, more than I expected. Thank you very much.
Maybe a quick question back to the audience. Who is afraid of artificial intelligence? Just by a show of hands. Who's afraid of where we're heading? Who's excited? More people are excited. Yeah, I think for me the happy median is to be cautiously optimistic. Yeah. And that's a language that Stan and I agree on. I think is important to look at both sides of the consideration. Thank you.
I think we have a comment on that same note.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for your answers. As a researcher, I'm excited about artificial intelligence because it's interesting to learn how this all works out. I'm just thinking of the world in the future. Will we have a world with only, let's say, corporates and private equity-owned organizations, or is there also place for small, medium, and enterprises? Because all this experimenting and everything and slowing down, and yeah, it takes time, and we're also hurrying in the every day just to make profit and to stay alive. If anyone could comment on that.
I'll start and hand it to you, Emily. So, the Netherlands are world champions in being small business owners. We have, by percentage, the largest number of single-owned businesses than any country in the world. And interestingly, the largest percentage of those businesses are female-owned. So interesting to know the statistics and where we already are today. With that in mind, however, and a really nice discussion that Daniel prompted earlier around individualism and the craftsman work, it is vital for these small businesses to collaborate and work together with industry, with corporates, with government. Because the one downside of having so many small businesses is that we're hindering innovation because we're working alone. So it's vital for these organizations to team up and to work together with government and corporates in order for us to really bring those innovations forward faster.
Yeah, I think I have a counterpoint to that. I do agree, though, in the Netherlands, I think I've seen the most sort of small businesses and entrepreneurial spirit than I've ever seen in any of the cultures that I've had contact with. But in any case, I think one of the things that AI will start to open up is indeed that innovation piece. I think there is a tough part, though, where who owns the data that AI is processing? Do we have any data scientists? Other data scientists in the room? No, just me. Okay, great. But so I mean, this is actually a point that I was going to make a little later on, but no day like today, I suppose. The thing with AI is that it does rely on processing data in the past. And that's also why it's ethically very difficult, along with privacy, but also, as you may have heard in the news, for example, one of Google's AI researchers was fired because she raised some ethical concerns about just the way that AI was being programmed. Because at the end of the day, it is programmed. It isn't actually artificial intelligence. It's artificial pattern recognition. It's actually basically like natural language processing, a bunch of that kind of stuff. So what I see happening in the future is that it's one thing for the data to be kind of to be owned by one particular party or a couple of particular parties, but the use of it, I think, will spur along essentially these like pods of people who are innovating, creating beyond basically what AI is able to do currently. So I do feel very optimistic about it as well, but I don't think that maybe government or I don't know if like regulation is necessarily the answer. It will have to be in the short instance, in the short term, but I think in the long term it can actually open up to democratize actually technology and democratize a lot of what we consider to be thought and creation in this world.
Thank you, Emily. Any other questions? Yes.
Great, thank you so much to all of the guest speakers. My question goes mainly to Stan, I think. So we are talking about the future of work more from the lens of, let's say, the technology as of it is a solution to a lot of problems, and it is. But my question is more gravitating towards the work that still requires quite a lot of human touch. So I'm thinking here about nurses, childcare, educators, bus drivers. And coincidentally or not, we see quite a lot of labor shortages, so somehow people are just not attracted to these type of jobs, while, again, coincidentally or not, those are the jobs that we cannot really easily get rid of. So my question would be, what is the take of the government to see the future of where are we heading?
Thank you for your very good question. But it also needs fantasy, yeah? It also needs imagination. I mean, you say that we're gonna need bus drivers, but well, I have seen cars without any driver, so I'm not sure if we really, if they're in 50 years, they're still bus drivers. The same thing, there will always be teachers, but will it be on a screen or will it be physical? Nursing or doctors, it will always be necessary. But things will change. You will see that, especially in health, we do have a problem in public sector work at this moment, and one of the biggest problems are the salaries, especially for nursing, a little bit less for education. The salaries need to rise, because at this moment, you saw it during the pandemic, people came back to the public sector, and now they're leaving the public sector again because they can earn more in the market. It's also just a market equilibrium. So we have to make sure that if the healthcare structurally has not enough people, then we need to raise the wages, and we have to pay it. The government does not have easy money. We shall all need to pay more tax to afford it, because we also want good government. We also want good healthcare and good education. I'm sorry, it's not. I can't imagine. There's no free money. So if the jobs are not, if the jobs are necessary in the future, and I still think, use your imagination because things really change. But then we have to pay for it together as a society.
Thank you.
Can I add something to that, Stan? Just a quick addition. I always feel that, and maybe I'm biased because I was trained as a psychologist. But if I have conversations with policymakers about these issues, almost always it comes back to the economic and sociological arguments of precarity and money, mostly money, more salary. Everyone needs a permanent contract. Now, don't get me wrong, having a good salary and good work is very important, but what I so often miss is the psychological perspective on work. We had this meeting last year which was about flex work, non-standard workers, so gig workers, agency workers, on-call workers. And this was a meeting dedicated to the psychology of flex work. So, you know, there are push and pull motives. Some people are pushed into on-call or agency work or gig work because they have to. Other people do it because they want to. And so we were talking about this idea of everyone needs to have a permanent contract. And there were several people saying, I don't want a permanent contract. I want to be a digital nomad. I want to go to Thailand and be there for 6 months and do my work. Or simply, I just want the autonomy of being able to switch jobs or roles more often. And some of the policymakers literally looked at us and they said, wow, this is such an eye-opener. I never thought about these issues from the personal perspective. And I was flabbergasted, like completely, I mean, for me, maybe it's like a duh, of course you think about the psychological perspective. I guess that's why disciplines need to collaborate, because everyone has their expertise. They have legal expertise that I have no clue about. But I do miss this psychological element, even in times of technology and AI, and there will always be people, and they have their motivations, they have their attitudes, they have their purpose. I think that needs to be part of the debate as well.
Short reaction. Thank you. Of course, I can also start about rostering in hospitals, which should be much better. Hospital organizations are notoriously bad, which also contribute to the fact that it's not an interesting job now. So I agree with you on that. But then also the examples you say about self-employed people, and of course there are people who really don't want to have a permanent contract. But if you are saying that in general in the Netherlands we have 40%, 40 people in the Netherlands, they don't have a permanent contract right at the moment. We are way beyond any other country in the world on this stage. And if you tell me that all those 40%, they really want to have no permanent contract, I'm sorry, we don't agree. Many people, there is a big group with people who have a flexible contract now, who wants to have a permanent contract, who want to have more job security, who want to have more security in their rostering or in their income. So don't fool yourself by stories that 40% of labor market wants to have a flexible contract, because that's just not true.
Now, of course, I do want to reply, because this is the problem. You see, this is the problem. You immediately tell me that I say 40% doesn't want a permanent contract. That's not what I'm saying. I made it very clear, money is important and contracts are important. Of course, security is important. It's a basic human need. I'm a psychologist, I should know about that. The point is, there's no nuance in debate, and the nuance is immediately missing. The nuance is that some people want it, some people don't. And there's no one-size-fits-all approach to that, and that's what I'm missing. I'm missing the nuance in the debate. And of course, some people want security overall, that's fine. Some people want autonomy overall, that's also fine. But the point is, there's so much evidence that there are many other additional elements in good work, decent work, sustainable employment that motivate people beyond only salary and only the contract. There's a lot of research on work design, job crafting, that has people in all layers, not just the highly professional, highly skilled professionals, also the toilet cleaners, the plumbers, and everyone who can make their jobs more meaningful, even if it may at first glance seem to us like a completely meaningless job. And that's the nuance I'm missing in the debates.
I actually do have one point to that. I think I'm a little bit younger than perhaps some of these others on the panel. I think one thing as well is that I don't know about you all, I think probably some of you here too, we were kind of sold this dream like, oh, okay, you kind of like go to school, you get your 9 to 5, you get your pension. And then as we've gotten older, we're like, oh, what pension? Are we ever going to retire? Is that a thing? I don't think so. And so I think also the values of, and this is also what I was alluding to earlier, was like the values of what we consider to be work and what work means to people is also changing, right? In terms of flexibility, in terms of exactly safety and security, it used to be for our parents, for example, my parents definitely, they're like, okay, we're gonna work at one company for 20 years, 25, maybe even 30. I used to work at IKEA. When I entered, someone was retiring after 30 years. I was like, I haven't even been alive for that long. That's crazy. And so I think that's also something to consider, is that going forward, and maybe this is something interesting for policymakers as well, is like our generation doesn't really care as much about those sorts of things as previous, because we know it's a fantasy, you know, there's no such thing as retiring at 65. I'm like, okay, good God, by then I'll be a cyborg, I think, so I'll probably live until I'm 150, you know, or something like that. I'll probably choose, you know, probably to go in some other way, but safety and security mean different things now. I think safety and security, especially when we don't have, like, people, as you were saying as well, like, birth rates are decreasing, less and less people are having babies, less and less people are having families, and so security no longer means I need to provide for my family, but it's like, I'm in this for myself. What do I want out of life? And I think that's also why work is changing, because it's meant to contribute to that. It's meant to be a supplement or a kind of like weaving in between the narrative of who you are as a person, as opposed to, okay, this is going to get me to retirement, inshallah. You know, like maybe I will, like who knows, I'll be able to take my cruise at 80 years old, because like at this point, who knows, you know?
I have a feeling to react, but maybe you have more questions and you don't want to have the panel talking all the time.
Okay, sorry, I don't know if this is working. Should I stand or? I wanted to add to what Dr. Akkermans was saying, and also Emily, in relation to companies hiring for the employees' needs. And there's a lot of conversation now about neurodiversity and the fact that people work in so many different ways. And I hear you on, hey, you know, let's just do the work, not be so boxed in about the 9 to 5. And also the idea that there are people, I'm one of them, that prefers shorter contracts, because I'm ADHD. You know, I can't conceive working for 20 years for an organization. I'd much rather have shorter term contracts. So is there a need for more companies to be open to the idea of hiring for these talented neurodiverse people? I mean, I've recently spoke to a guy who said he prefers to hire these types because he knows that there's a lot of innovation, a lot of creativity, and a lot of outside-of-the-box thinking. So is that another addition to their future of work, that we consider, you know, neurodiversity knowledge for management in relation to employing people?
I'll start with that. Yeah, because I'm also neurodivergent as well myself. I don't know if anyone has ever walked into a tech company, but it's basically a whole spectrum of neurodivergent people, and it's kind of interesting in itself. But where it does lack in diversity is indeed like people of color, like marginalized identities, women for sure. And there's a lot of work to be done there. But I think there is an embracing of kind of like the modality of work, as I was saying before, right? If you're neurodivergent, you prefer to work in a certain way, it's cool, that's fine, as long as you get it done. I think that's also why it's so easy to embrace that. Nonetheless, also on top of that, startups and scale-ups, most companies I've worked at, it's always been a question, it's like, okay, are we gonna exist tomorrow? I have no idea. And so that's almost, to some extent, very exciting for some people like myself. For some people, it's scary. No, thank you. I would rather work somewhere else that I know I can stay for the next like 5 to 7 years, for example, at least. And so I think there is something for everybody in that. In the tech industry specifically, I think exactly right. Like I do try to hire for particular, like indeed neurodivergent or just kind of a dedication at least to the way that you work and self-awareness. I think that's a big thing as well. When you're not self-aware, and especially when you're in a remote situation where you really have to be self-aware because you're only accountable to yourself really most of the time. We'll say like 99% of the time. You really need to make sure that the people who you're hiring are aware of those things that they're doing and how they're doing it, et cetera. I think for the larger diversity question, though, it does, it goes to, I think, like one of the questions, we're just going to tackle the questions even though you haven't asked them. But one of the questions was basically, yeah, how do we foster like a diverse workforce? And part of it, I think, is also part of remote work is that you need to be, it's no longer the case where there's a ladder of career. You don't start at the bottom, you don't go up like this, you go like this, maybe here. I mean, I myself went like here, and then I went like this. And I didn't even expect it. But you just kind of have to embrace the change and the adaptability. I think Stan and Joost, you were both talking about that. So one of the things as well is to make sure that expectations and performance are very, very explicit as to exactly what you're looking for as an employer. And that also helps people on whoever you are, like various identities, understand, okay, these are the requirements, and no matter how I get there, who I am, I can get there, you know, because that's clear. It's no longer like, oh, you're here for 2 years, you can get promoted. It's like, no, That's not the case. I think one thing that would be really good for everybody, though, and that's something I wish they would teach in school, is the softer skills. So like I was saying before, technical skills, you can kind of always learn. It's not that hard, if I'm being completely honest, you know? Like, but if you have things like self-advocacy, it took me something like 7 years, half of my career to figure out how to self-advocate. What I mean by that is that you go to school here, you get a grade on your paper. When you, especially if you're a good student, you go into the workforce, you're thinking, great, I'm gonna be rewarded for my good work. No, you're just doing your job. And therefore you're getting paid for that thing. So if it's an A, you're good, you're doing your job. But if you want promotion, the terms around that previously, and still are in a lot of companies, very unclear. But if you have a neurodivergent or even just a diverse workforce, you're forced to basically say, hey, okay, here are the standards for everybody, and you coach different people to reach those goals in certain ways, but at the end of the day, it makes it a lot easier for everyone to be successful because the criteria for success are very, very clear. And so I think, and again, it doesn't matter how you get there, as long as you get there, but it has to be sort of an agreement between employers and employees that is indeed the case.
Is there still time for a further comment?
Yes, please.
Because I agree completely with what you say, and I also agree with what Jos said, but I have a slight nuance here. Of course, you want to have your own job, and we would love to be able in this country to create a labor market where you can do whatever yourself are good in. But then again, there must also be people in the government who think about, but what if things go wrong? I was a director of economic affairs in the city of Amsterdam. Amsterdam has during COVID period, Amsterdam has 70,000 self-employed people, ZZP'ers. Amsterdam is capital of self-employed people in the Netherlands. 40,000 of them lost their job from the one day to the next day. And all those 40,000 people, before they said, well, let me be self-employed, I don't want to pay that much taxes, I can arrange for myself. But then, from the one day to the other, there was no money anymore. There was no income, and those people, they all came in 2 months, 40,000 people to the government, please give me money. If we don't have systems ready for it, if we don't have a social security system ready for them, it's the social responsibility of the government to take care of these people. So I agree, of course, we would like you to be as free as possible, but I think it's a good thing, but that's because I'm a government official, that we have a safety and a security network for which people have to pay taxes. I'm sorry, it's not free. We spent 40 billion people as a country. We loaned it from the children, that you are going to pay it back. So that the last 2 years during COVID, we didn't have mass unemployment. We didn't have, actually in Amsterdam, we were afraid that people would not have money for a supermarket, so we started to make kitchens for free meals. In the end, it wasn't necessary because our national government, they borrowed 40 billion people. But you really have to think about these kind of things, even if you don't like it.
Thank you very much. Because we are running out of time, so I would like to ask our esteemed panelists to share their takeaway message with us in 1 minute, please.
And we're clocking you.
This is a sneaky test of our improvisation skills. Yeah. Let me go first. I think part of the discussion we're having today, and I echo the keynote, is that a lot of what we're talking about is not new, right? We now call it 21st century skills. 30 years ago, we called it career competencies. 20 years ago, work readiness. 10 years ago, career preparedness. So the discussions are not new. Fundamentally, they're the same, but they are getting a new kind of flavor, so to speak, right? So now it's ChatGPT that we're talking about. In 10 years, it'll be another flashy new tool that we're afraid will cost all of us our jobs. And I think it's just important to continue having the conversations, but be aware that there's so much that we already know about this as well, that we shouldn't just, don't throw, how do they say this? Throw the baby out with the bathwater? Is that a right expression? I'm Dutch, so sometimes my English expressions become Dunglish, but anyway, right? So I think let's also use what we know and well, to put out a cliche, and then I'll give it to you, to continuously learn and develop.
Really great, Jos. Thanks so much. So I think just in closing, it's such a rapidly evolving space, and the workplace of the future. Where is that, or what is that? One thing that we've seen is through the COVID pandemic, the rise of more women coming back to work because of the flexibility of the hours of operation, the timing that they could do their work. And for all of you in the audience today to embrace that spirit of continually learning, be lifelong learners, and here you are at the beautiful university, continue to be a learn-it-all, because that is how we're going to find our way into the future. I guess I would ask you the question, if we look at the market right now, and we had this big discussion just now about the gap in certain roles. Globally, we miss more than 9 million nurses. So it's a particular skill, a particular trait, and it's detrimental to society that we miss so many workers in that space. But if you can imagine that technology can complement some of the work that they do, not all of it, but there are certain tasks that nurses do that can be complemented by technology today, so that they can focus on the more complex and the more humanitarian type of work that they really enjoy. Many years ago, I had an eye transplant. I'm blind in my left eye. I lost my eye on a business trip. And my surgeon said to me, Cara, the reason I went to medical school is to work with patients like you. And it's not because I want to help you read an eye chart and see how blind you really are. It's because I got to perform one of the more complex surgeries, and that's where I really could test myself, where I could really put all of my skill to practice. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm not here to help you read an eye chart. And the good news is that we have tools that are online, like Easy, that can help you to do an eye test online that you don't need an optometrist for anymore. But ask yourself the question of, in the future, do you want to work with someone who is working with the tools, who has learned how they can complement the work that they do and are empowered and enabled through technology? Or are you going to look for the people that haven't figured that out yet? So I encourage you to continue to be learn-it-alls and to embrace the technologies that will come at us, whether it's ChatGPT 3, 5, version 50, wherever we are in the future, so that we can learn to thrive together, both organizations, government, and individuals together.
The government is not very good at predicting the future, I have to admit. And we're not very innovative. That's not our strong point. So, and we're certainly not communists. So the society, it will decide itself how things will develop. And the government is there to regulate, to make sure that there is, the ethical issues are concerned, because they're always very weakly organized in society. And we also, you can be assured that there will be always will be a government safety net to make sure that we have a society in the Netherlands which we together vote for during elections. Well, that's basically the role of the government, and I can assure you that will be in the future, whatever ChatGPT or whatever developments will come. And if you're interested in that, well, maybe you should consider a career in government policy.
Last but not least, the pressure's on. Actually, I agree with Cara, indeed. I think that at the end of the day, what we're going to go back to is this kind of like, I mean, we're not communists, but maybe commune living, where we all just kind of live together in this happy little universe. But no, I think that's one thing. So indeed, I think AI is going to take over some of the more menial tasks that we're used to. Even something simple as scheduling in meetings and things like that, you know, that you still have to do no matter what kind of job you have, unless you have a personal assistant, which some people do indeed, but that can be replaced indeed. But I think there's also a piece that is also missing here is also the building of these tools. That's very instrumental because there's still people who need to build it. AI can't build itself. But I do think, especially with like concepts like universal basic income and things like that, we are moving more and more towards a world where potentially we may have some very bad art. You know, everyone's like, oh, I want to be an artist. And you're like, really? You? That one? Okay. But like, I think, you know, but the point is that we will all have more of a chance to be more creators, you know, more innovators, and really think outside of the box. Like I said, think outside the box. Inside the box is already done. inside the box, as we all know, is indeed covered by AI, et cetera. Also, inside the box is mostly things we don't want to do. Like, do I want to go to the grocery store? Do I want to cook? No, thank you, unless you get joy out of that, which is cool. You do you. But for myself, like, these are the things I'm kind of like, oh God, I don't want to put any more like energy into this, and that's what AI can possibly free my time and energy up to do in terms of work. And I think also even the concept of work is changing already, like I said, and in I think even a short like 20, 30 years time, this conversation will be very, very different. Exactly what work will be. Maybe it'll be about creation. We're like, oh God, I'm tired of creating, but I don't know. One can hope. We'll see. I'm looking forward to all of your bad art.